Okay, hello. My name is Clare Sudbery. I've been a software engineer for more than 25 years, and I'm a technical coach, which means that I work with teams to help them improve their software development practices. As a reminder of what test-driven development is, the idea is that you write a test and see it fail before you write code that makes it pass. So the test always comes first. And the reason the test comes first is it actually helps you to design your code, because you're writing code that will make tests pass, which means that you're writing code that is testable. And that means that you can verify the quality of the code. You can verify that it works. Test-driven development is something that I'm an expert in and that I teach, and I have been doing for a long time. So it is a particular interest of mine. I try to avoid the term AI because it's not really intelligence. So I prefer to talk about LLMs and using LLMs to augment the coding that you're doing. My workshop was very specifically about how to use TDD in that process. And the reason that I teach that is that what has been happening is that as more and more people use LLMs to help them to write code in production environments, so code that actually is being deployed and used and by millions of users, what people are discovering is that in order to do that well, you really need to go back to basics. You really need to think about those fundamentally important software hygiene practices. It's not as ubiquitous as you might think, but test-driven development is actually a very useful way of asserting the quality of software. When you're working with an LLM, the problem that you have is that you have potentially less sight of the code and less control over the code, because the code is potentially being written by the LLM and not by you. So it's especially important that you can verify the quality of the code, that you can be sure that it works. And it's particularly important because anybody who's done any vibe coding, so if they've just said to an LLM, build me a thing, and typically what happens is the LLM goes, ta-da, I made you a thing. And you go, great. And then you try and use the thing and it's, oh, actually, no, that's not quite right. And what is noticeable is that very quickly an LLM will give you a thing that's really impressive and very fast. But then as you try to improve it, it will degrade over time. It will quite often get worse rather than better. The LLM will get slower rather than faster. And what's really interesting is this applies to all software development if you don't apply good practices. So if you just create a thing with no tests and no design and no thought about whether this code is going to be maintainable, how you're going to fix bugs, how you're going to do regression testing if you add a new feature, how will you know what you've broken? If you don't write tests to start with, all of those questions become difficult and all of that future development becomes slower and harder. The same applies to LLMs. So if you start with tests, then you can say, right, okay, you've written me a thing. You don't even have to look at the code if you know that it's making a test pass. So you know that you've asserted in the test what should happen, and you've made sure that it does happen because it's making the test pass. So that's why, for me, TDD is absolutely crucial if you're working with an LLM. And it can also make working with an LLM very satisfying and actually kind of fun. There are a lot of concerns about the things that people are doing with LLMs and also the way that LLMs work. There are lots of areas that I would absolutely not be interested in getting involved in. I'm actually very wary of chatbots. That's not something that I'm involved in, and I would be very cautious about getting involved with chatbots, because I think as soon as you put something out there that people are going to interact with without you having any oversight of that, then you open people up to all sorts of potential problems. The worst examples are the examples of people committing suicide after treating an LLM as a therapist. And this can happen very easily. These situations can happen very easily. And also, chatbots can go rogue. They can say things to your customers that you have no control of. And it's very, very difficult to avoid those situations. So that's one area that I would be very cautious, and I'm not currently involved in. Other areas, I'm very wary of anything that around copyright. So I don't use, and to be honest, I don't like the art that's generated by LLMs. I don't enjoy the videos that are generated. I don't enjoy the images. I really kind of hate them, to be honest. I mean, that's me. Some people love them, but I do not use them to generate images. I much prefer to generate my own images, and I'm concerned about the fact that there are individual artists who are not getting credit, whose work has been sucked in and regurgitated. The same applies to music, the same applies to literature. I do use LLMs to generate text, but only when it's something that doesn't need my voice. So, for instance, if I need to write a blurb for a conference program, I'll use an LLM. The purpose of that blurb is to let people know what's happening and encourage them to attend. LLMs can do that. But if I'm writing a blog post, or if I'm writing a novel, because I am also a novelist, I'm writing that. That's my voice. That's my experience. I want it to be me that's doing that. So there are areas outside of code generation which are problematic. But then there are also areas such as the environmental impact. So the fact that it's so resource intensive, that bothers me. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is to consider small language models. So to consider having a small language model that's trained on your own data, which also gives you much more control over what the inputs into the LLM, the actual training data, and that is hosted locally, so that you're not boiling the oceans in data centers on the other side of the world. Does this make it okay? I honestly don't know. There are security issues. I mean, I haven't even listed all of the ways. There are the ways in which AI has been used as an excuse for huge job losses, like huge impacts on people's lives. There are problematic impacts of these things all over the place, and I'm not an apologist. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm very aware of all the issues, and I'm still on the fence. It was very interesting in the workshop yesterday that when we did a conclusions at the end, we were like, well, overall, what are they useful? Do they help you? Do they improve your workflows? Do they speed you up? And we were all in the workshop kind of on the fence. Personally, I do find them fun to work with. Personally, I find they get me over the initial hump. So a lot of people use them in that sense for writing purposes as well, just to suggest ideas. And I can see the value of that. But certainly in coding terms, particularly if you're working with a new technology, or if there's bootstrapping or a config that you're not sure of, LLMs can be really helpful with that, and they can get you going. But then it's very easy to convince yourself they've sped you up, when if you pay attention, they haven't necessarily. So I really like what the annual DORA report has said, which is that they see LLMs as amplifiers. If you have good coding practices already, they will amplify that. But if you have bad coding practices, they will amplify that. So they can make you better, but they can also make you worse. I still think that there can be a net benefit, but I am on the fence. I'm not going to say everybody should use LLMs to write code, because I think it's a mixed bag, and there are reasons why you might not, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong about that.